These are the stories my parents and my grandparents told me about the war. In the First World War, my mother was born August 1914. So she didn't see her father for 5 years because he was out. I think he was probably, did the food in the butchery for some of the armed forces. So she never saw him for 5 years, and I don't think it was a very happy meeting when she did meet him. My other grandfather, Adolphus, he was a musician. So he was out there entertaining the troops, and that was a story that used to relate to us. So they were pretty lucky. I don't think they actually got involved in any of the fighting. But during the Second World War, my dad was in the signals, and he was attached to the 7th Armoured Brigade, which was out in the desert. I think they were called the Desert Rats. My Uncle Jack, which was Mum's eldest brother, was in Norway. My Uncle Herbert became an RSM, and he was stationed out in Germany, and he was one of the people that liberated Bergen Belsen. And he was so affected, I think, by the experience. He always supported Childline, places, people like that, and anything to do with children's charities. He was wonderful with them. And then there was my other Uncle Owen, who was in Burma. And the most thing he came back with was malaria. And I can remember we didn't see him for a few days, and I had to climb in through the kitchen window, and he was in bed with malaria. I think he was 3 days in bed on his own. So we had to get the doctor to him. But my dad's experience during the war, they never spoke of it very much. He'd tell you funny things, but he met up with a lot of people from the Ton while he was based out in Egypt. I think he met up with Harry Collins from Taftswell, who was the coal merchant. He'd come home and he'd tell Mum, never forget who I met out there. When he loved, I got to admit, a lot of the time he was out there, fighting aside, which he thought was absolutely awful, he wouldn't even get his medals because he said it was such a dreadful experience. He was on a troop ship going into Cape Town, and he always wanted to go back because he said that first view when you went into the harbour at Table Mountain, and they were attached to a black African brigade, and he said some of them were better educated than us. They were servants in people's houses, and he said they were wonderful. Another time he was in Tunisia. I think he was in Tobruk and El Alamein, and he always wanted to go back to Tunisia. So we did. We went back in 1968, I believe. And we took a trip down to the desert, and we were going across in the coach. We were going to an oasis, and there was a place called El Gem, and you had to get it. You went across a salt plain, and we were going across, and he never said much, and he said, "You see that hill over there?" So I said, "Yeah." He said there was a German machine gun encampment up there, and he said they kept us pinned down. And he said it went on for days, and until, he said, we sent the Gurkhas in. And he said, they stripped all their clothes off, just had pants on, and they put the kukris, which are their knives, in their mouths, and they crept up the side of this hill, and within an hour, all the Germans were dead. And he said that was my memory of the Gurkhas. He said they were fantastic. How we got through it without them, he didn't know. So we went right down, and we went to this place called El Gem, which is like the Colosseum in Rome. It was amazing. And we went to a cemetery that the British soldiers were buried in, and it was absolutely immaculate. People did the grounds, all the little gravestones, and it was so sad because 17, 18 and 19-year-olds were buried there. And Dad got a bit emotional, I have to admit. And he said you could sign the book. So we all signed the book. And a little bit further along were the German graves. And it was unkempt. Nobody looked after them. And they were like white crosses. And he thought it was awfully sad. For whatever reason, these were young soldiers and they all died, whether they were British, German, or whatever. So he told us some funny stories. He said they had a tent in the desert, And he said, I can remember waking up one morning and he said a sidewinder, which is a poisonous horned viper, had crawled across him in the night because you could see the marks in the ground. And then he went out the back of the tent. And he said another time they were on patrol and somebody kicked a tin can out of the way and it was booby-trapped and it blew his foot off. So it's all these things. And he decided, I think it was 1953, when the coronation was, there was a get-together in Royal Albert Hall. So he went up on the train to London, went to the Royal Albert Hall, didn't see anybody he knew, so he came home. And on the way, he bought a lovely little souvenir of the gold coach and the horses that the Queen was carried in to a coronation. So I still got that here somewhere. No, it's something that they didn't speak of, and Uncle Herbert especially, because it must have been a dreadful experience going into Bergen Belsen.